And away we go. Hello, everybody. It's Jay Baer, founder of Convince and Convert. Thank you so much for being here for today's session. We are thrilled to have you. This is going to be a whiz-bang program. We get two incredible speakers. We have a bunch of brand new research that's never been released before. We're talking all about omnichannel, why it's so important, and frankly, why it's so hard for brands to make it work. This session called Physical, Digital, National, Local, How to Thrive in an Omnichannel Future. It's not about me, however, friends, it is about my two guests today. Welcome to the broadcast, Nasser Sahlool, who is the VP of Client Strategy at DAC. Nasser, what is up, my friend?
Hey, Jay, wonderful to be here. Very excited to share the material today.
You bet, and thanks so much for DAC's role in getting this research put together. Collin Colburn is here as well, Senior Analyst from Forrester. Collin, what is going on?
Yeah, nice to be here, Jay. Really glad to be here and excited for our conversation.
I like your photo. It looks one way, and your video looks another way. This feels like a pre-post Corona pandemic kind of facial hair choice. Is that what's happened?
A little bit, but I usually have some kind of facial hair in the winter time. It's going to be going away pretty soon as we enter spring, which is great.
I see. It's a seasonal choice. So
Right.
Here's my first takeaway. Collin's facial hair is not omnichannel, or at least it's not omni-seasonal, friends. It is circumstantial. Couple of housekeeping notes as we get rolling here. First, feel free to interact. We'll take questions throughout. Use the questions tab. I think it says chat, but it'll be better for you to use the questions tab here in GoTo. It'll be easier for us to keep track of those. We are, in fact, recording this session. We will send you a recording afterwards if you want to drill down on some finer points, share it with other folks in your organization, etc. The best marketing strategies are, in fact, omni-channel, those that bring together digital and physical worlds together in a cohesive and contextual experience. And I find that phrasing very interesting, cohesive and contextual. Collin, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think it means a couple things. I think one is that the cohesive part being connected, right, between digital and physical. Basically, that you are creating an experience that isn't just one way digitally or just one way physically. It's that the two hang together in a nice and smart way. And the contextual piece, I think, is probably the most interesting one, as you said, because that clues in a little bit of like who the customer is, where they are physically, or where they are in their journey. And I think the really important thing to note here going forward is, with so much of the data deprecation stuff that's going on in the world of privacy and deprecation of third-party cookies and all that sort of stuff, contextual is taking on a new meaning today in terms of what that means for omnichannel.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that in this session. Omnichannel more important than ever, but harder than ever to actually do it. Nasser, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and about to get even more difficult in the near term. So I think one of the findings of the research when we get into it in a moment is just how much work needs to be done coming up very soon. But yeah, it is critically important, and I think one of the or a couple of the things that are most surprising. First of all, omnichannel is not a new concept. There's almost a part of you that when you're talking about and using that language is thinking, is this 2010 again? Why are we still talking about this? Because people fundamentally understand that this is critically important, and when done right, it has a transformational impact as far as brand perception and growth in people's minds. So the fact that we're still discussing how hard it is to implement, we're still discussing the fact that so many brands are not living up to this promise is astonishing given what we know about the impact of doing this right.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said, that the idea is not, I mean, back in the day, in the pre-internet day, I used to buy a lot of things in catalogs. I was a catalog shopper, as was my wife, and we would get 10 catalogs a day and kind of flip through and occasionally buy things and call the toll-free number to buy a sweater or whatever. And omnichannel was just as important then, because many of those catalogs also had retail components, and you call and you have one sort of experience, and then you go into the physical store and have a different experience. It's really the same as what we're talking about now, which is now we have more channels, right? And people kind of spread their chips evenly across all those channels. I mean, I would call a catalog from, I don't know, I'll think of an example like Banana Republic, right? I would call their hotline twice a year to order something. I'd go into the physical store more. Now with digital transformation, the which channels you consume as a customer tend to even out more often, which means if you don't have cohesive contextual consistency, it stands out now, right? Doesn't that make sense? Like, to me, that what's changed a lot is that people really get bothered by it in a way that before, like, yeah, it's not perfect, but that's okay. Now people really are affected by lack of omnichannel.
And I think that's only going to continue going forward, because the pandemic, I think if there's anything that I believe that it's done to consumers, it's not that we're all going to be shopping online for the rest of our lives and online's the only avenue. It's going to be, we're going to expect a good experience regardless of where it occurs.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think the other consideration when we talk about the context of the pandemic, and we're thinking context here, and there is a school of thought that says, well, we've been doing most things digitally now for the last year, so everything will continue to be mostly digital moving forward. I think the research is showing that that's not going to be the case. And in fact, if you want to think about it just purely as an individual, from an emotional perspective, there's a reason we're all sitting at home depressed. We're kind of done with no tactile component to our lives, right?
Yep. Yeah, and we're going to see. I suspect Collin's already working on this if they don't have it in their back pocket at Forrester, that there's going to be a huge roaring back of physical retail, as people sort of get let loose from whatever quarantine they're living under. You're going to see the same thing in travel. You're going to see the same thing in a lot of categories. Now, whether that persists, you're going to get this big spike, this sort of post-COVID, like roaring 20s, like we're free spike. Now, what happens 2 or 3 years after that? That to me is the real interesting question that I don't think anybody can answer just yet. But what we can answer is a lot of questions about the state of omnichannel today. How can we answer those questions? Well, we did a bunch of research about it, friends. Collin's team and Nasser's team collaborated on this terrific study. It's called Create Competitive Differentiation by integrating digital and physical experiences. As just noted, it's not as if the whole world is going to be digital only. That is a fallacy, my friends. Went out and surveyed 256 marketing and digital experience decision makers all across North America and Europe. And these are true leaders in their organizations, director level and above. The quality of this data is spectacular and a ton of great findings. Congratulations to both of you and your respective organizations for getting this research completed. It's really important stuff on a topic that is incredibly important and that doesn't get talked about enough, in my estimation.
Appreciate it.
Question you might be thinking, amazing attendee of this session, is great, Jay, how do I get that report that you just lavished praise on? Well, we're going to make it super easy for you. At the conclusion of today's program, we are going to send you the recording, as mentioned earlier, and we are going to send you a copy of the report for yourself. If you are so eager that you cannot wait until the end of this session, open a browser window and go to dacgroup.com/omnichannel, and you can read along at home if that's how you want to play it. Of course, feel free to send that URL to other folks in your organization, colleagues, clients, etc. dacgroup.com/omnichannel. Now, before we get too far down this road, I want to restate, because we throw around omnichannel all the time as sort of a term of art, and I suppose it could be accused of being a little jargony from time to time. But I think it would be useful, Collin, for you to talk about sort of how Forrester defines an omnichannel experience and kind of how that definition was crafted.
Yeah, so this is crafted with really two things in mind. It's crafted with the marketing and customer experience function of an organization in mind, in terms of how those two those two teams at any company have to come together in order to do this. It's not just a marketing thing. It's not just a trying to drive awareness or trying to drive performance from your marketing investments. That's omni-channel, and it's not just creating the experience or trying to evoke a certain experience that often CX pros and design and UX folks are trying to do. It's both. And then the other thing in mind is the customer, right? Like this, we've been preaching this for so long that customers don't see this divide between digital and physical, and it needs to be broken down within organizations. And it's been a very, very slow process, and we're going to get into some of the data that shows that we're making strides towards progress, but it's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There's still so many organizations we talk to where literally the entire company is organized around digital and physical. Not even within the marketing organization, like the entire finance, operations, everything is sort of split down this line, and that really needs to that wall needs to really be broken down slowly in order to effectively do this.
Yeah, certainly. I say this to my clients all the time. Your customer does not care about your org chart. Like, they literally don't care. Like, the fact that physical and digital are different divisions or departments, they do not care. All they want is a sweater or tires or whatever it is that they're looking for. It's not their cross to bear. Carol had a great question. Thank you, Carol, for participating. The rest of you, please feel free to jump in with questions and comments in the questions tab in your go-to control panel. Carol says, it seems like more companies are realizing the value of the customer journey. That's more prevalent than ever, that companies are sort of awakening to that. Nasser, would you agree?
Yeah, I certainly, when I think about the conversations that we're having more and more, building everything around that customer journey, using insights and data to map that out appropriately against various audiences is really the starting point. And I think, if I may, this is a really important point because it showcases the maturity or the maturing of the market, to understand the difference between true omnichannel, as Collin has defined it, and what traditionally people have said, okay, we're doing omnichannel today, but it isn't. So traditionally what's happened is organizations are built around products, say, or services or what have you. And it's about, how do I market this product or service against people, but primarily focused on individual channels. That isn't omnichannel marketing, that's multi-channel marketing. The key differentiator.
Golf clap that up. That is so good. So good.
The key differentiator and the key defining feature of omnichannel is it's not built around product, it's built around people, and it's built around audience. So the fact that organizations are now opening up to that and saying, okay, we need to start with understanding of audience and building out that customer journey around people, and then seeing how the brand pivots around that, is a real sign of maturing of the market.
Oh, that is so well articulated, and it's such a critical point that multi-channel isn't omni-channel, right? Multi-channel is just trying to do a bunch of things similarly in different places. Omni-channel is taking a customer-first perspective with how you build these programs out. So well done. Thank you, Nasser. It's a great elaboration, especially considering we did not practice that. That was off the top of his head, ladies and gentlemen. Isn't he amazing? All right. This one goes to you, all of you who are tuned in right now. I'm asking you this question. Go into the questions and answer this, because I'm really curious to see what you think. So in this research, we asked all the participants, do you think that your organization has an omni-channel strategy? What percentage of study participants say that their organization does not? What percentage of participants say that their organization does not have an omni-channel strategy? I'm interested to see what your prediction is. Collin, I'm not going to make you reveal the answer just yet, because I'm going to in just a second. Did you have a guess, a supposition, when you were fielding the research, what you thought it might be?
I thought it would be a majority for sure. I was probably thinking somewhere around 60%.
Okay, 60%. Great. Ken has weighed in with a guess of 76%. Jim Lisinski. Hi, Jim. Nice to see you here. Jim Lisinski, legend in the category. 51% says Jim. Robin Anderson says 72%. Thank you. Eli Grant, 75%. Eli, thank you for participating. So it looks like we've got a lot of Similarity is around 3/4. Michelle says 60%. The actual answer is, all right, wrong way. There we go. 85%, my friends, 85% of organizations say, nah, we're just not doing that. And that is remarkable to me, because a lot of times when people take surveys, they're like, yeah, we're pretty good at it, right? They sort of fudge it towards the positive. 85% no. Collin, elaborate on this slide for us.
I mean, I think the really interesting thing, I mean, yes, the big headline here, 85%, I mean, it's a massive number, but when you break it down a little bit more, you have 10% that are saying that in-person and digital experiences are basically independent from one another completely. And you have 26% that are saying that they're somewhat integrated, they're kind of on the roadmap of getting there. That's a huge, I mean, we're talking over a third of companies that we surveyed basically saying like, yeah, we're not there at all. Like most of this is just treated completely separately from one another. That to me is actually, in my opinion, the bigger statistic here, because that is where the most work needs to be done. And I'm sure we have people that are on the call here today that are in that situation, and it's not something, you know, that is to be like looked down upon. Every organization has been there at some point, and this is really trying to get the rest of the market to transition to more of an omni-channel, at least a somewhat, you know, 50-50 kind of integrated strategy, rather than it just being like mostly, you know, very independent and very separate.
Yeah, for me, this number was shocking, and it's shocking because as we talked about earlier, we've known for a long time that this is what people are looking for. I mean, think about all of the conferences and materials that people have been putting out for years now about personalization of experiences, and we know that when done right, it's driven transformational performance. It's even and especially during COVID, right? So with the world disrupted, the thinking or the thinking and the perspective was everything is digital, but in fact people still do crave that, or actually need that physical experience. But because it's so disrupted, it's been difficult for people to determine how best to transact and having to relearn all of that. So I can think of a particular client that does this very well, and this has led to a 100% increase in total revenue during COVID on a flat budget. So we know that when it's done well, it has these impacts. So to see numbers like this, to see that, you know, there's so much work to be done is really interesting. And I know we're going to talk about data deprecation later, but the longer we put this off, the more difficult it's getting.
So true. Yeah, the longer you wait, the harder it gets. And what I find interesting about this topic in general is it's not as if people on marketing or ops experience teams are like, yeah, we don't believe in it. Right? People aren't saying, no, omnichannel is not good. It's not worth the time. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. There's very little of that thinking. It's just like, where do I start? Right? It's like trying to, you know, drink, you know, an ocean out of a straw. And it's a really challenging problem, partially because it forces you to work cross-departmentally, cross-organizationally in the enterprise, which is difficult at the best of times. A quick acknowledgement here of Paul's question. Thank you, Paul. Nasser, I'll send this to you. Why did it take a pandemic for companies to put customer experience first?
I think if you look at the tenure of the average CMO, what is it, Jay? 12 months, 18 months?
I think it's all the way up to 20 now, maybe something like that, but it's not many. Yeah.
There's some job security for you, but you've got to make an immediate impact, right? And these types of initiatives take a lot of work because it involves cultural change inside of an organization. There's a technology component, there's a people component, you know, there's a change of the thinking component in all of these kinds of things. And it falls to the bottom of the list in terms of getting things done, as opposed to what are the quick wins that I can address today, right now. And sometimes those quick wins just don't align with some of the foundational wiring work that needs to happen here and that needs to become a priority, that doesn't win awards, that doesn't get people's attention, that doesn't, you know, land with a thud on the boardroom desk. So I think that is a critical reason. And when something like the pandemic came along, it removed a lot of the excuses, but also what I think it did is it gave people freedom to fail. So when you have years and years of models built up around what works, and you're expecting incremental change, it's like, well, okay, I'm new, I'm going to come in, I'm not going to break anything, I'm going to get this much more, and everybody's going to be happy. When that isn't available to you anymore, you have an excuse to fail. So you might as well break the thing and try something new and start implementing these things.
I'll add
Really
one little tidbit onto what Nasser just said.
Please.
And I believe that a big reason for this 85% number, and a big reason why the pandemic sort of catapulted, this hyper focus on the customer, is because the CMO, with their lack of tenure, has sort of abdicated. If we think about the 4 Ps, they've abdicated 3 of the 4 Ps. They've abdicated price, they've abdicated product, and they've abdicated placement. And those 3 things, especially product and placement, are super important inputs into an omni-channel strategy. And if there's not a single owner of those 4 things together, that makes the omni-channel experience very, very difficult to execute. And I think that's why you saw, someone like the CMO of Accor Hotels, the way in which that CMO really innovated the entire organization was with their brain power, was with their sort of like CMO swagger that they had, of really looking at the situation and saying, how can we as a marketing organization not just help on the promotion side of things, but really help reinvent the entire business? And what they did is they really they focused on turning their hotel rooms into more of short-term office-like stays, and it had a pretty significant impact on their being able to float down the pandemic path.
Yeah, now you see some of the other hotel chains kind of mimicking that and saying, well, why don't we just be WeWork, right? Like with a bed, it's fine. Nobody ever says, how we're going to make our quarterly numbers with a new omni-channel strategy, because it's going to take a lot more than a quarter to get that figured out. So yeah, exactly right. It requires long-term thinking. Some really interesting variation in the data as well, Collin, by region and industry. Do you want to touch on that briefly?
Yes, we found some really interesting trends here by region, by industry. You can see some of the statistics here. I think the industry differences are more interesting. They're a little bit more telling as well. We're 92% of retailers. I tend to think we talk about, anytime you hear about omni-channel, you think retail immediately.
Because
and that's where
the prevalence of the physical.
Right, because they're so prevalent on physical, but they're also so prevalent on digital. But it's really shocking to see that after all this time of thinking about omnichannel, using that term and really relating it directly to retail, that a vast majority of retailers are still saying that, yeah, we don't really have that. We don't have that ship in order. Financial services firms on the same hand, though, 75% of them. So it's still not great, but there's a chunk of financial services firms that are actually doing this pretty well, and I think that's because of the rise of digital banking that's gone on for so long, and we've seen this spread across the financial world. So I think a lot of the financial services firms have really tried to hone their balance between how they service customers in person and how they service them digitally.
If I may, I think when we look at the regional variations, there is variation, and even when you drill down to the inside of the European numbers, they vary by country, and we looked across a number of countries here. And when we look at that and kind of wonder why, because we looked for companies that are a certain size and above, and to try to remove some of that variation around, well, budgets are smaller in Europe than they are in the United States, for example. I think there's some interesting nuances within that. So there's not just the budget component, where, of course, to do this really well, you do need a pretty sophisticated marketing technology stack, as an example. So that's a consideration, but there's also a cultural consideration around sharing data, right? Sharing customer data, sharing your own data as a customer, and in particular, in certain countries in Europe where there is a cultural and historical resistance to that. And what I think is really interesting is not that, it's how brands over there have actually responded, which is to say, well, with GDPR and all of these sorts of things, we're going to defer to what lawyers say, and we're not going to do these things because obviously there's, people are reluctant to give us their data, as opposed to saying, okay, we're going to create such exceptional experiences and that we're going to get people to want to give us their data so that they can have even better experiences as a result. I think that's the more progressive angle to take here. And it's surprising that hasn't happened, but that the path of least resistance, whereby you get to kind of say, well, you know what, there's not much I can do as a result of this.
Yeah, very different regulatory philosophies, which makes it all the more challenging in some parts of the world. Collin, we have a funnel. We have several different colors. Tell us what these colors and funnels mean.
Yeah, so what I want everyone to focus on is really the middle part of the funnel, which is, the whole consideration, research, comparing stages of the journey. That is where we found, and this is not surprising to me at all, because I've done a lot of research lately about sort of the dynamic between brand marketing, really good at driving awareness, and performance marketing, really good at driving conversions. One of the findings from that research has been that as marketers have kind of bifurcated the way in which they do marketing, the middle of the funnel gets overlooked, and we found that exactly here in our research as well. And it's not just two different functions in the marketing organization; it's really the entire. It's this, again, cross-functional sort of overlap that doesn't exist within the middle of the funnel to really help support customers that have already known about the brand, or already know about the product, or know about the solution, and getting them to be more informed about the decision that they're going to make. It seems to be an area that is very overlooked because we tend to care much more about the eventual outcome, even though we know that we need to assist and really help reduce decision stress during the middle part of that funnel.
Yeah, mid-funnel is not very sexy, and attribution can be a challenge at mid-funnel. I'm starting to see more focus on mid-funnel in B2B, where sort of digital comparison and things like that is really getting some additional attention. But I completely agree that if you say to a marketing organization without any inputs, like where do you want to spend your time, it's always awareness or conversion, right? That's just is how it happens every time. It is purely psychology. Nasser, do you want to jump on that?
Yeah, it's because it's nobody's job. It's somebody's job in an organization to be responsible for awareness.
Is not really a position. Yeah.
No, it sounds awesome. But it's nobody's job. You've got a director of brand and you've got a director of performance often, right, inside of organizations, and the connectivity of the two, where their goals aren't aligned necessarily, is fascinating. And we talk about this idea of all media should perform. So all media, in effect, is performance media, which isn't to deprecate the value of brand media. It's to say we need to ask questions of brand media and, in fact, hold it to a higher standard, because when done right, when actually connected to performance media, it makes the performance media work so much better. But we're not doing that in the main. But when we do it, and I think that's another consideration, going back to Collin's point around Omnichannel has this retail connotation, but it need not be. I think omnichannel experience, when we think about customer journey, can also be about the alignment of all the different parts of the funnel and the seamlessness of those areas of the funnel.
Chief Product Comparison Officer. That's the job we need. Come up with that title. Let's start getting that out there.
Much sexier than middle of the funnel, dude.
Yeah. I have a quick question on the previous slide, Nasser, or Collin. I just don't know the answer, and I want to make sure we address Nancy's question here, which is this. On the FinServ data, do we have that in the report broken down by types of financial businesses, so like retail banking versus others, or do we just have it categorized as financial services?
I believe we just have it categorized as financial services.
I thought that was true as well.
I don't think we went deeper than that.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind for next time. Nancy, as mentioned, all of you will receive the report here in just a little bit, and you can drill down on it as well. All right. As we have been discussing, it is hard to do this. I mean, if 85% of leading marketers in North America and Europe say they're not doing it, you probably can figure out on your own that it's hard to do it. It is hard to do it. We are not by any stretch of the imagination casting aspersions on organizations that have been unable to create a truly seamless experience so far. However, we are saying that putting the time, money, effort, focus on it is worthwhile. Nasser, as you said, you've got clients that have actually really stepped up to the plate with help from DAC Group to do this, and the results have been spectacular, right? This is not a waste of money. This is truly an investment. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, for sure. And it's not something that happens overnight. And central to this is understanding of audience, connectivity of data from disparate sources, both online and offline, as well as different areas of online. And building in a very thoughtful way media, content, alignment of those areas underpinned by that data. And when done, the impact that it has is truly spectacular. But it's a journey that takes years to get there. But the most important thing is get started. Do something. Do something. Right?
Do a thing.
Do the thing.
Thing. So here are some of the things that organizations have found challenging. So I love the way this question was phrased. To what extent does your organization find these areas challenging when delivering an omni-channel experience? And top left, number one, 85% say that is either extremely challenging or very challenging to derive actionable insights from customer data. I have said this over and over and over for years. We are surrounded by data, but we are largely still starved for insights. Data is not the problem. It's not about big data. It's about big understanding. And the gap between those two is the real challenge. Nasser, as you talked about earlier, it's going to get harder, not easier, because of changes to cookies and a lot of other data sources. What do we do about this?
Well, so a couple of things. First of all, we will be having a follow-on webinar specifically about the deprecation of the third-party cookie and what's coming up next and how to address it. But this point about a lack of actionable insight, and the key word there I think is actionable insight. Do something different as a result of the insights you're able to draw out of this is critically important. We have a standing joke at DAC. We talk about the fact that organizations use data the way the drunk people use lampposts, which is for support rather than illumination. It's there to justify the actions or decisions you've taken in the past, as opposed to really challenging whether or not you're doing the right things and plot a new path forward. So being able to do this isn't just a matter of technology, because I think that a lot of the organizations that we've talked to have actually put in enterprise level data and analytics solutions, BI platforms, all of these kinds of things. They're not applying or taking the time and making the investments to apply themselves to pull out that data, because often, and we hear this from a lot of organizations, even if they do pull out those insights, the organization isn't ready to do something new about it. So at the core of it is not just a data issue or an insights issue. There's also a cultural issue about doing something different compared to what you've been doing all along.
I couldn't agree more on the cultural issue. I mean, it's funny because when you look at all these data points here, it really comes down to lack of insights because we think we don't have the right tools, and we also don't really understand our customer that well. But at the end of the day, the only way to really solve that is through the resources and the people and the actual skills you have internally to begin with. Because you're never gonna find the right tools if you don't have the culture or the understanding of the market in place. You're never gonna be able to understand the customer if you don't have sort of that customer-centric approach to the way that you do business. So I think there's so many facets of the data that we're seeing here that just come straight back really to exactly what you're talking about, Nasser, which is culture and the way in which people work and the experience that we have as employees at the place that we work, not just our customers' experiences, but our experiences as employees of a firm, and what that looks like and how we can better that to improve customer experience.
And we find often that a lot of in-house teams where there are these, especially since a lot of these data science teams are relatively young or new, shall we just say, to the organization, there's almost like there's an element that's getting lost in translation So when we've been working with a lot of these teams, where we found big gaps and where we've added a ton of value is being able to draw out those insights and help translate them to the rest of the organization in a way that the organization understands and is able to action now and do something different as a result.
Yep.
It's interesting to me how many of these challenges are tools adjacent, right? So 77% say they struggle to identify and implement the tools. 72% say working with disparate data and tech tools. 61% say they have trouble tracking metrics, which is probably going to be some sort of tool stack. 77% have trouble maintaining a unified profile. That's also tools at some level. And so I guess the question is, Collin, is it really a software problem, though, or is it a cultural problem? I find it fascinating that 77% have challenges identifying or implementing the tools. Identifying the tools to me at this point seems like an unlikely hurdle, right? There are a lot of big companies with incredibly sophisticated tool sets that would love to take your money to solve this problem. They would love nothing more than to send you an invoice to take your omni-channel pain away. And you've got incredible organizations like DAC Group who can help you navigate that thicket. So to me, it's not really a lack of tools. It's that challenge implementing the tools. And is that actually, as you said, a cultural issue more so than a we don't know what we need to buy issue?
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of how to implement, because to me, it's you can have all the tools in the world. If you don't know how to use them, if you don't know how to apply them, then it really doesn't mean anything. So I think that's part of the issue here is that I tend to find that a lot of the clients that I talk to, you know, they're getting all these different kinds of tools and they're building their stack, and then it kind of goes by the way. Some of the tools go by the wayside, right? Where they're either unused or they don't know how to get. Yeah, they don't know how to get the insights out of them. They become a ghost tool. But I think there's also a bigger market dynamic that's at play here too, which is we can't ignore the walled garden approach that's going on, right? Where it's not easy for these tools to be able to get data that is necessary to really get an understanding of the full customer journey and what, you know, insights are actually usable across channels. So there's that's at play here too that doesn't really benefit anyone really.
Nasser, is your perspective, I don't want to steal the thunder from your follow-up webinar on deprecation of cookies, but is DAC's philosophy then that growing your own data is the path of success in the future?
First party data, 3 words. That is the single, that's, I don't want to say magic bullet, but that's pretty much as close as you can get to the answer to the question. Build your audience now, clean up your first party data, get it ready. And you know, while these changes are really, we're looking at what, 2022 for these changes. So you can sit there and say, well, we've got plenty of time. This is a lot of work to do the thing that we just outlined. I mean, to get back to Collin's point, and to connect it to Collin's point, how many times, guys, have we seen organizations where they've invested huge amounts of money in terms of in tools and platforms, Salesforce or Eloqua or what have you, and they're using it like MailChimp? You know, there's no segmentation, there's no real data that's driving new decisions or automation that is the tools are capable of. This is not a tool set problem. This is a problem about investing in the talent and in the understanding of how to fully leverage these tools in order to drive the outcomes that we've been talking about today.
In the study, found 3 things brands are doing that are successfully contributing to their omni-channel experience. Sort of 3 markers of success. The first one is actually promoting their brick and mortar locations. I found that really interesting, and it sort of correlates to effectiveness. Who wants to take that?
I can take it. You know, we found here, this is great data that shows 75% of organizations basically saying like, the brick and mortar experience, the physical experience isn't going away. It's going to be probably even more important going forward. I totally agree with that, and it jives with everything we've been talking about so far today. But the thing I think that's important here to note is that I think we've gotten to a point, we're starting to see a little bit of a tipping point now within digital marketing, where digital marketing investments have almost always exclusively been focused on driving online activity. And I think we're starting to find a tipping point where it's actually like, okay, we can still use it really well for online activity, but for most organizations, we probably tapped out on as much as we're going to get out of digital marketing fueling online activity. The next growth area, believe it or not, is offline, is getting digital media to fuel offline activity and offline growth. So I think that was super interesting to find that a lot of the really sophisticated omnichannel organizations, they are focusing on not just online, they're focusing on brick and mortar when it comes to the way that they do their marketing.
And if we think about what we mean by promoting physical locations through digital media, what does that actually mean? It means things like geo-fenced media, paid media campaigns. It means local content and listings. It means Google My Business, Google Posts, ratings and reviews. Jay, you talked about this previously around, what's the stat of that where people drive up to a physical location and then sit in a parking lot and read the reviews to decide whether or not to walk in?
Like that, 24, 30%, I remember the exact number, but yeah, it's a lot of people have acknowledged that they drove to a place, grabbed their phone, checked the reviews while they're in the parking lot, which is amazing, right?
Right. It's insane. So the influence and the opportunity of properly optimizing the local digital experience to align it with driving in-store traffic and revenue is spectacular. And as Collin talked about, that's the real growth area here.
Yeah, it sure is. Second thing that we found that correlates a lot to success in omnichannel is that brands that are doing this well value both qualitative and quantitative benefits, right? It's not purely a spreadsheet exercise, that they understand that customers are leaving cues and clues that they can then cycle back into the organization to improve the experience in all the places.
Yeah, I mean, this one I think is super interesting because we have become so quantitatively focused, right? Like that's been the whole shift of marketing becoming more science than art. And I think with folks that are really taking an omni-channel view, that pendulum swings back a little bit more to the middle, where we have to look at the value that marketing has beyond just the direct performance metrics-based numbers, but also the value it has to the brand experience overall. I think that's what this is really talking to, is that the overall impression that my customer, or maybe even my prospect, maybe people that don't even really know me are getting introduced to me for the first time, what they feel, what they think, and how that has an effect on what they eventually go and do from a quantitative perspective. So you kind of see this nice flow of how these brands are thinking about the emotional side of marketing with the more mathematical, science-based side of marketing.
Well, when you talk about actionable insights from your data, this is one of the areas where you can produce that, right? It's hey, we did a bunch of listening, we interacted with customers, we found this pattern that may not be purely data centric, but it's still a thing, right? And let's use that to improve products, to improve customer service and retention. There's a lot of benefits that sometimes supersede a graph. No offense to Collin and the Forrester team. We're very good at making graphs.
It's totally true, and it really helps you. I think this using qualitative data will also help you even get more granular about defining who are my most devoted customers. Like who are those best kinds of customers that we really need to be focusing most on to expand and enrich with.
And these customers will tell you. They will tell you who they are, and they'll tell you what they want and what they love and what they hate, right? In the form of reviews and those kinds of things.
Social posts.
So the ability to derive insights from ratings and reviews in order to empower the future of the business is really fascinating to me.
I think that's a great, not to belabor this point too much, but it's a great point that you bring up, Nasser, because I think this is going to lead a lot of these brands that are in this 15% category of doing this really well today to be more reliant on things like preference center data, basically like asking their customers, their most devoted customers, what experience do you want to have with us, so that we can go and take that back and better tailor the experience to you. Which, what does that mean? What does that do for you? It helps you become less reliant on third-party data, basically all forms of data that you're not going to have as such good access to going forward.
And look, you can infer customer desires from third-party data that you trust is accurate. or you can just ask the customers, right? Like, which is actually a better source of data? To ask people what they want is the better source of data in every respect. Now, is it as easy? Well, no, of course it's not as easy. But nobody promised us this would be easy. We just promised that it would be awesome. You don't get both. You got to pick one. All right, third thing that good brands are doing is they are prioritizing insights generation, which is similar to what we talked about a second ago. This idea that without insights, you're just sort of flying blind on the omnichannel spaceship, which is a scary, scary place to be. And part of this, though, is data management, right? And analytics infrastructure, and having somebody in the organization who kind of knows where all these nodes are and kind of has the true kind of data lake ecosystem picture and role and responsibility. Nasser, anything you want to add to this in terms of how DAC Group works with brands to kind of make this work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so there's two different streams here. One is on a pure data science basis. So our Prove Intelligence team are extremely adept at connecting these elements together, including the online and offline components, and then pulling out those insights to make them actionable across the organization. But the other point here is around this idea of localization. Localization and location as a point of context on that customer journey, whether it's around physical location or even a locationless business, but location as a point of context on that customer journey is critically important, especially as data deprecates. So it gives you the context, it gives you insight and information that would be otherwise unavailable to you. And being able to then optimize around that experience is an element that also drives the types of performance outcomes that we've been talking about here today.
Speaking of performance, Nasser, I'm going to ask you a question from my friend Tom Ray. Hey, Tom, thanks for tuning in, by the way. He asks, what role does traditional media play in the omni-channel experience moving forward? Tom's background is in television. I'd be interested to see what DAC's perspective, or Collin's, yours as well, is on that question.
I think it's a very critical part of this. So if we think about traditional media, whether it's radio or broadcast, TV or what have you, to be able to build models that take that into account, to understand the influence of that on individuals, it's just another channel. It doesn't matter if it's online or offline. It needs to be aligned with the entire customer journey in an audience-centric way based around location and so on. So I don't see it as necessarily distinct. I see it as just another channel that needs to be held to the same level of accountability as every other platform and channel that we have out there.
What's funny though is Collin talked about how many brands still have sort of the physical marketing budget and the digital marketing budget. It's the same at this level, right? You have the traditional media budget and the digital media budget, which is largely an anachronism.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, go ahead. You look like you were going to say something smarter than I was.
No.
All right, recap our key points here, friends. First, 85% of organizations lack a seamless omni-channel experience. Mathematically, you do as well. That's okay. You're in good company, clearly. Second, B2C organizations have two main challenges in omni-channel: incorporating disparate elements into a seamless experience, and then accommodating middle of the funnel activities, as we talked about earlier. Middle of the funnel is sort of the forgotten child in the customer journey. To succeed, promote brick and mortar locations, right? 75% of brands say that brick and mortar are a huge impact on their success in the next 3 years. We can't throw out the baby with the bathwater and say it's digital only from here on out, because it ain't true. Second, value both quantitative and qualitative benefits of omnichannel. And then third, prioritize insights generation, right? That what you learn is going to make you a better organization just as much as what you sell. Nasser, anything to add to that?
No, I think I'm excited to talk about the specific recommendations that Forrester's put out around, okay, so where do you go from here?
Where do you go from here? Collin, where do they go from here?
So I think first and foremost, I just read a really interesting article in Digiday this morning that showed that during the pandemic, they've found that more brands are dedicating an increasing share of their budget to test and learn. And I think that's our first recommendation, is that you really need to set aside investments in other types of media to really think about where's our next area of growth going to come from, and how are we going to be able to reach our customer as they continue to move around and be, frankly, very fragmented in their overall journey. So I think that's first and foremost, is investing in different types of media, but really specifically keeping 5-10%, I would say, of your media budget to test and learn into new emerging channels. Second is getting comfortable with less data access. We talked about this before, but I think what this really gets to is we're not going to have access to third-party, non-owned data nearly as much. And I think it's actually a good thing, because what is it doing? It's doing what Nasser said before: first-party data. It's the most important, valuable piece of data that you have. And if you haven't been leveraging it well before, which most organizations we found haven't done a great job of doing that, now's the time to start doing that, and that'll make you get more comfortable with having less data access. Third, driving innovation by owning more than just the omni-channel promotion. This is what I talked about before with the 4 Ps element, is that promotion is fine, but as a marketer, in order for omni-channel to really work, it incorporates the other 3 Ps. And I think what I specifically think of is that it's not that the CMO needs to go out and go get the product team and rein them under her control. It's that we need to start using the inputs of the other 3 Ps to inform our marketing strategy. And that will help the CMO, I think, get a seat at the table within product, within pricing, within placement, and that will help spur innovation. I already said that allocate 15% of your media budget towards test and learn. I think that goes directly into what I was saying about testing new channels and always having budget for that. And then the last one here of creating a roadmap for your omni-channel strategy. Nasser said it before, you got to start somewhere and you got to start today. I would say absolutely yes, but also have an eye on sort of the next year and a half. Because if you don't, then it becomes, well, we've done this thing, so what else do we need to be doing, and how can we make sure that we're prioritizing the things that we need to be doing in order to really bring physical and digital together. And I would say the last point on this one is that really I think the important thing, if I'm a marketer, is who are the cross-functional people that I need to have work with me on this roadmap? Is it our UX and design team? Is it our product team? Is it our retail marketing team? Is it, it could be a variety of different people, but we want to make sure that you have sort of a cross-functional approach to the way that you think about building out your omnichannel strategy.
If I may, the one that really jumped out to me was this first one around invest in different types of media to bolster your strategy now. And when you look in the report, it expands on that more, but this idea that in your findings that people say, well, in the upper funnel, we're going to be digital only, and in the lower funnel, to do these functions, it's going to be digital, and then to do these functions, and in this part of the funnel, it's going to be physical only, and they're disconnected. I think this is the big opportunity here, is connectivity of physical and digital at the different stages of the funnel, but also connectivity of different digital experiences. So we think about, and we've been talking a lot about digital almost as if it's one thing, but we think about paid and organic, for example. Often inside of organizations, these are 2 disparate teams. Social, different team, right? Disparate teams. The idea of aligning all of these things and asking harder questions to, for example, say, okay, what is the responsibility, for example, of organic at every stage of that customer journey? What is the responsibility of social at every stage of that customer journey? And how do we now modify these things and align them so we reduce waste and drive performance?
Nasser, a word about DAC before we wrap it up with a couple questions.
Thank you, and thank you, Jay, for hosting this. I appreciate your passion and liveliness in this format. So at DAC, we are a digital performance agency that drives transformational growth for our clients across North America and Europe. And we are built for national and international brands that need to transact with audiences at the local level, both on and offline. And we do this by aligning media and content powered by technology and underpinned by data throughout the entire customer journey from the brand to the local level. And it's this focus, integration and alignment, that has allowed DAC to help clients to achieve transformational growth before and during the pandemic, and now preparing to continue that trajectory into the post-pandemic environment.
Thanks so much, friends. If you need some help making this happen, you could do a heck of a lot worse than DAC. So they have my endorsement. We're going to send you the report as we mentioned, so you're going to have that in just a minute. A couple of quick questions. Sarah Caruso asks a great one here, Nasser. All right, you guys talked about getting first-party data. How do we do that? What recommendations do you have to collect it? Obviously, we could do like 5 hours on that, but want to give Sarah a quick tip?
So I think it's about building value. There's a value exchange. So if you want people's first-party data, you have to give them something in return. Build experiences that are going to delight them and give them a reason to give you their data, right? It's not a matter of go out and buy it, don't collect it, don't do that, but give them a reason, give them a worthwhile element, give them that value exchange.
Yeah, and I think it helps to put your own consumer hat on as a marketer. If a brand asked me to tell them more about me, what would I need in return in order to say yes to that? Put that same filter through what you're asking your customers to do, and it might make this first-party data collection go a little smoother.
That's right.
All right. Let's see. Colin, I want to ask you this one from Karen because it's a really fascinating question. She asked, what can retailers do who have cash preferred customers, right? How can we sort of bridge the digital gap? Because there are customers who still prefer cash and maybe they don't want to do online payments, things like that. What's the kind of omni-channel reality there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the omni-channel reality there is that I'm sure that those customers still use digital channels to do their research. So I think the middle of the funnel here becomes extremely important of helping them maybe digitally decide, but knowing that, you know what, they might not actually transact here, and that's okay. Like we're fine with them transacting in a physical location via cash. So I think that's what my recommendation is that focusing on that middle part of the funnel. That's a great example of when you should do that.
Yeah, I mean, by definition, ipso facto, right? A payment technology selection is a low funnel behavior, right? That is a conversion oriented choice. And so a lot of things happen before you decide how to pay, whether it's Apple Pay or filthy paper currency or anything in between. All right, don't forget dacgroup.com/omnichannel to grab the report, but we will of course send it to you. But if you want to send that to other folks so they can get it, that's the place to do it. We're going to wrap this up on time. I want to thank Nasser for his fantastic participation. Thanks to everybody at DAC for putting this together. Colin, you and Forrester as well. It's been a real pleasure working with both of you on this program.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you to everybody that joined us today.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Nasser.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. I'm Jay Baer from Convince and Convert. Thanks for your kind attention. Take care.